In practical terms, what is the separation between a Chinese company, even a nominally free one, let alone a state-owned enterprise, and the Chinese government? Are they legally obligated to cooperate with the Chinese government and its intelligence services, making these pretenses of independence essentially a polite fiction? Or can they really say no if the Chinese government comes along and says, we want you to use your 5G network to spy on whoever bought it? Could Huawei say, no, we're not going to do that, get lost?
Absolutely not. There's no real distinction between a private, I use air quotes when I say that, private Chinese company and a state-owned enterprise. There might be some, and there are some differences, no doubt, in on the margins, maybe how they're run and things of that nature. But on this issue, there's no difference. They are absolutely legally obliged to assist the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese government, with intelligence gathering and anything else the government asks of them. It's well known, it's well documented that all of these, virtually all, probably all of these Chinese companies, private, again, I'm talking about the private ones, have Communist Party committees like embedded within these large companies. There's a lot of links between senior leadership of these countries and the CCP, or even the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, the Chinese Army. So it's a fiction that they are not instrumentalized, that they're not by the Chinese Communist Party, that they are not under its influence and its sway. And we know that Beijing, if it feels necessary, it is necessary, will not hesitate to use its again, private companies in these sorts of ways.
Huawei is in the news for another reason today, as it happens, because its chief financial officer, Meng Wanzhou, just lost her bid to have her extradition case thrown out of the Canadian court system. So she has apparently one more appeal left to go, and then if that doesn't work out, the extradition is going to proceed. The Chinese government is livid at the Canadians for continuing to prosecute her and potentially send her back to the United States for prosecution, for extradition. Has that case injured Huawei's image around the world at all? Has it embarrassed them? Has it given anyone second thoughts about dealing with them, knowing that their chief financial officer is accused of serious financial crimes?
I'm not sure. I don't know if that specific case has warned off or scared off any countries. So that case is about Iran sanctions and how Huawei was circumventing those. Huawei has a long history of all sorts of nefarious activity. They, again, in many other well-documented cases, have bribed officials at the most senior levels of African governments. They use all sorts of underhanded tricks to win market share and things of that nature. And, of course, they benefit from the anti-competitive help of Beijing. So I'm talking about subsidies here, very direct political interference by Beijing on behalf of Huawei. And it's not just Huawei, of course. Any of its national champion companies receive the same sort of help from Beijing. So again, I think that record by Huawei, if it didn't already scare off a country, probably this case in Canada would not have scared them off, because any country that was at all aware of recent history should have known all of the baggage that Huawei carries with it.
Where do you think the coronavirus pandemic leaves China's efforts to extend its influence through Africa and the developing world? And Chinese media is pretty triumphalist, and they think the pandemic should be a good thing for them because it shows what great leaders they are and how important they are. They want to build a health Silk Road to go along with the Belt and Road Initiative and spread their medicine through the third world. Is the pandemic going to help them do that in the way that they envision, or has it inflicted so much damage on them and shaken trust in them enough to where it will compromise their efforts to spread their influence through Africa?
It's fascinating because you're absolutely right. They're taking what should have been a PR disaster for them, their botched handling of the outbreak, their continued obfuscation, actually, around the facts of what happened, and they're trying to turn it into actually a PR victory. And Africa specifically is the site of one of those campaigns. As you described, they're trying to construct this Help Silk Road. I think we have to wait and see on this one. I think it's very much still in doubt whether they are going to be successful or not, because for one thing, some of their help that they've been giving has been exposed as not particularly helpful. So we know about a lot of these stories coming out from Europe and elsewhere about the PPE or the personal protective gear that China has been sending out is faulty. Some of the tests that they were sending didn't work. And there's also been stories of, again, particularly from Europe, of China demanding public displays of gratitude from recipient countries for receiving this aid. So this is all rubbing countries the wrong way. These are missteps, obviously. But in Africa, given the strength of the relationship between so many African countries and Beijing, I think that China is making more headway in this global PR campaign. But there have been other issues in the relationship that have hurt China, particularly a spate of racist incidents in the Chinese city of Guangzhou, which has a very large African population there. A lot of videos came out, reports of Africans being mistreated, of being locked into their houses, of being forcibly tested, things of that nature. And that really has hurt has really hurt China and China's image in Africa.
Is that a lasting injury to China and Africa? Does it seem like something that's going to blow over, possibly for the same reason that the African political elite just doesn't want to stop doing business with China, so they'll swallow their objections? Or is this a lingering wound in that relationship?
It's a really interesting question because it's one I'm following very closely. There's a yawning and growing gap between how the African public perceives China's engagement with the continent and how African elites perceive it. And it's exactly for the reasons we've already talked about. African elites do benefit personally, oftentimes, from engaging with Beijing, but the average African doesn't receive those same sorts of personal benefits, of course. So they are much more sensitive to the negative sides of Chinese engagement. Now, I don't want to say that average Africans are completely opposed to what China's doing, because China does bring cheap technology, for instance, of smartphones that are affordable. They do build a lot of infrastructure, things of that nature that average Africans appreciate. But they are much less personally incentivized to want this relationship to continue at all costs, no matter what. I still think this is going to blow over, just on the official level. Let me say that. Already the African governments have worked very hard to quickly move on, to put it all behind them. They've accepted China's non-apology for the Guangzhou incidents, but this absolutely is lingering on the African street. There's smoldering anger about this. I've been surprised at how long it has lasted. Actually, clearly it's something. It's maybe not the straw that broke the camel's back, but the straw that has further burdened the camel's back for many average Africans, because the response and outrage has been quite sustained and deep.
Joshua Meservey, Senior Policy Analyst for Africa at the Heritage Foundation, thank you very much for joining us tonight.